Our first materials management strategy is going to be the forecasting of inputs. So this topic is all about how can we make our operation system up here more efficient and effective. We've got some strategies and we're looking at materials management and the forecasting of inputs. So what is it? Well, to answer that, we sort of need to take a step back and go, how does a business know how much stock or inventory it needs? So ultimately it comes down to question one. What products does the business think customers will want in the future? Before we buy inventory, we need to know what we need to buy. Second question, well, what materials do we need to make those products? Then I guess we need to ask how much or what quantity of these materials do we need? And then a final question, when will we need those materials? And then it just always goes around in a cycle. What do we think customers want? What materials do we need? How many and when? But a forecaster takes a step back and says, well, before we even go to what products does the customer think customers will want in the future, we will do a forecast. And that is where it gets very useful. So to optimize operations, we're going to do a forecasting of inputs. That is looking at past business trends and data to try and predict future customer demand, allowing the business to reduce uncertainty so they can accurately predict what products the business should produce, so what do customers want, the quantity required in the future, and when they will be required by the operation system of the business. Ultimately, the aim of forecasting is to match the supply of all those materials that we have with the demand from customers, and we're trying to make sure that ultimately we never have too much or too little stock on hand, and that was what we looked at in the previous video, saying both of those are just as bad as each other. This is going to be very important for particular businesses, in particular a business where their product is seasonal in nature, e.g. it's released and or more popular at set times each year. Forecasting is also going to be very, very important when the product takes time to produce, so the inputs need to be purchased well before the product is available to be sold to customers. Or maybe they need to be purchased in a particular sequence. So the product is made of a lot of inputs, but we don't need them all at once. We don't need all the products of making a car. We probably put the windscreens on last. Well, we don't need them at the start. We probably want to start with the body or the motor of the car. So just looking at some examples, swimwear. If this is a calendar year, we know that if we're in the business of making swimwear, that we're going to need a lot of more inputs during the summer and spring months than we'll need in the middle of the year during winter. That's just going to be based on customer demands. We now need to forecast when we need what materials and parts that we'll need. Looking at fashion, fashion's always known as there's a different fashion or different product range each season. So we would need different inputs for the summer range, then different inputs for the autumn range, different inputs for the winter range and the spring range. And we're also not making them during that time. So the spring range would be made months earlier, for example. So that makes it more complicated too. And then looking at something very complicated, say like an iPhone, that would be very difficult. So let's say the new model of iPhone is going to be released in November. Well, Apple doesn't start making it in October. They start making it many, many months before. So let's say 6 months, probably even longer actually. But then again, looking at an iPhone or any sort of electronic device or a car or making a plane, something like that, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of parts. So now that gets very, very tricky. We need to forecast not only what parts do we need, but in what order. So we might need the processors here in June, the frames in July, the cameras in August. We're assembling the phones as they go. Then we need the buttons and then finally the screens. So the ordering of inputs is very, very important as well. So we want to have what we need when we need it, and we're going to do that with a forecasting of inputs.